The screen is black. You hear only water, the sound of waves rolling, endless and deep. Then, beneath it all, something else. A low hum. Mechanical. Alive. In 1943, a weapon changed everything. It didn't roar like a cannon. It didn't scream through the sky. It moved through the darkness of the ocean, hunting, listening, waiting. This weapon was born from one man's refusal to accept the impossible. His name was barely known. His invention was called illegal by some, brilliant by others, and by those who faced it, terrifying. Imagine standing on the deck of a warship, the greatest machine ever built by man. Steel towers rising from the sea, guns that could destroy cities. You feel invincible, safe, protected by walls of iron and the power of 1,000 men. Now imagine something beneath you, something you cannot see, something that hears the heartbeat of your ship, the rhythm of your propellers, and it follows that sound. Closer, closer. You cannot run from it. You cannot see it coming. And when it strikes, there is no warning. This is the story of the acoustic torpedo, the ship killer that hunted by sound alone. But before we understand the weapon, we must understand the man who dreamed it. A man who saw the war differently, who believed that size didn't matter, that silence was more powerful than noise, that the future of battle wasn't above the waves, it was below them. His name was not famous, history almost forgot him, but his idea changed the course of the Second World War. Let's go back. When battleships ruled the seas like kings, when every navy believed the same thing, bigger was better. Stronger was safer. But one engineer looked at those massive ships and saw something else. He saw targets. Slow. Loud. Predictable. He was born in a small town. Quiet. Unassuming. As a boy, he loved to take things apart. Clocks. Radios. Anything with moving parts. He wanted to understand how things worked, how they could work better. When war came, he was drafted. Not as a soldier, as a thinker, an engineer. They put him in a room with others like him, men with pencils and paper instead of rifles, men who were told to solve problems, to create, to invent. The problem was this: enemy ships were destroying supply lines, convoys carrying food, weapons, medicine. They were being sunk. Thousands of sailors were dying. The war could be lost at sea before it was ever won on land. Traditional torpedoes existed. Metal cylinders filled with explosives, launched from submarines or ships. They travelled in straight lines, fast but predictable. A good captain could see them coming, turn the ship, avoid them. So the question became, how do you make a torpedo that cannot be avoided? Most engineers thought about speed, make it faster, give it more power. But this man thought differently. He thought about sound. Ships make noise. Engines rumble. Propellers churn the water. Metal groans under pressure. Every ship has a signature, a voice, unique, constant. What if a torpedo could hear that voice? What if it could follow it? Hunt it? Even if the ship turned, even if it tried to escape. The idea was radical. Many called it impossible. The technology didn't exist, the science was untested, and some said it violated the rules of war, that it was too dangerous, too unpredictable. But he didn't stop. Late at night, while others slept, he worked, sketching, calculating, testing theories on paper. He filled notebooks with designs, with possibilities. He imagined a weapon that listened, that could distinguish the sound of an enemy engine from friendly ones, that could adjust its path mid-flight, a thinking weapon, a hunting weapon, and slowly, piece by piece, it began to take shape. This wasn't just about winning battles, it was about survival, about protecting the men who sailed those dark waters, about changing the balance of power, about proving that intelligence could defeat brute strength. But creating it would require breaking rules, ignoring doubters, risking failure, and accepting that once this weapon existed, war would never be the same again. To understand what was at stake, you must first understand the ocean in wartime. Picture this. You are 18 years old. You've never been far from home. Now you stand on the deck of a cargo ship. Around you, 20 other ships. A convoy. Merchant vessels carrying fuel, food, ammunition. Everything needed to keep armies fighting thousands of miles away. The ocean stretches in every direction. Empty, cold, beautiful in daylight, terrifying at night. You are told to watch for periscopes, for the thin line of white foam that might betray a submarine. But the ocean is vast, and submarines are small. And patient. When an attack comes, it comes without warning. A flash of light, a deafening roar. The ship beside you erupts. Metal tears. Fire spreads. Men scream. Some jump into the water. The freezing water. Others go down with the ship. Your ship tries to zigzag, to make itself a harder target. But you're slow, heavy with cargo, easy prey, and somewhere below, invisible, another submarine waits. This was the reality for thousands of young men. Boys, really, sent to sea in ships that were never meant for war, ships that carried grain and oil, now carrying the weight of survival itself. Between 1939 and 1945, over 30,000 merchant sailors lost their lives, not soldiers trained for combat, just men doing a job, feeding nations, keeping hope alive. The submarines hunting them were called U-boats, German vessels, silent killers. They travelled in groups called wolf packs, coordinated, deadly. They would surface at night, attack, and vanish before dawn. For years the Allies had no answer. They could drop depth charges, bombs that exploded underwater. But you had to know where the submarine was, and most of the time you didn't. Escorts tried to protect the convoys. Destroyers, small warships with speed and guns. But there were never enough. And the ocean is too big to guard every ship. Families at home waited for news. Letters that sometimes never came. Telegrams delivered by somber-faced men. Your son, your husband, your father, lost at sea. The war wasn't just fought on beaches or in cities. It was fought in the cold depths of the Atlantic, in the dark waters of the Pacific. And it was being lost. If the convoys couldn't get through, armies would starve. Planes would be grounded. Tanks would run out of fuel. The entire war effort depended on those cargo ships making it safely across the ocean. This was what hung in the balance. Not just ships. Not just steel and cargo. Lives. Futures. Freedom itself. And so the pressure mounted. Find a way to stop the submarines. Find a way to protect the convoys. Find a weapon that could hunt the hunters. This is where our engineer's idea became critical. Because what he proposed wasn't just a better torpedo. It was a weapon that could change everything. A weapon that submarines couldn't outrun, couldn't hide from. But building it meant solving problems no one had solved before. How do you teach a machine to listen? How do you make it distinguish between sounds? Between friend and enemy? Between a target and the ship that launched it? The technology was called acoustic homing. It required microphones that could work underwater, circuits that could process sound in real time, guidance systems that could adjust a torpedo's course while it moved at high speed. Every component had to be small, waterproof, reliable under pressure. One failure and the weapon would become useless, or worse, dangerous to the ones who fired it. The engineers worked in secret facilities, underground workshops. They tested prototypes in lakes, in controlled environments. They failed, again and again. But they learned from each failure, adjusted, improved. Meanwhile, at sea, the dying continued. Every day brought new losses, new names added to lists, new families grieving. The stakes were unbearable. The clock was ticking. And the question remained, could they finish it in time? Some nights, our engineer couldn't sleep. He would walk outside, look at the stars, and think about those sailors, young men his age, men with mothers and sweethearts and dreams, men who deserved a chance. He wasn't building a weapon for glory. He was building it because every day it didn't exist, more people died. This was the weight he carried, the responsibility, the hope that his idea, his illegal, impossible idea, might save lives instead of taking them. And finally, after months of work, after countless failures and small victories, they had something. A prototype. Crude. Imperfect. But functional. It was time to test it. To see if sound could truly guide a weapon. To see if the impossible could become real. The first test was conducted in a remote bay. A target ship was positioned. Old. Destined for scrap. The torpedo was loaded. The acoustic system activated. Everyone watched, holding their breath, hoping, praying. The torpedo launched. It entered the water smoothly. For a moment, it seemed to wander, searching. Then, as if it had caught a scent, it turned, straightened, accelerated. It struck the target dead center. The explosion echoed across the water. The old ship shuddered, listed, began to sink, but no one celebrated, because they all understood what this meant. They had created something powerful, something unstoppable, something that would kill, and once released into the war, there would be no taking it back. Success, they discovered, was more complicated than they imagined. The acoustic torpedo worked. That was the easy part. The hard part was what came next. Because every innovation in war creates a response. Every new weapon sparks a new defense, and the cycle continues, endlessly. Let me tell you about a sailor named James. He was 22, from a small fishing village in Scotland. His father was a fisherman. His grandfather, too. The sea was in his blood. When war broke out, James joined the Navy. He was assigned to a destroyer, a small warship designed to hunt submarines. It was dangerous work, but James was good at it, calm under pressure, sharp-eyed. His crew trusted him. In early 1944, his ship was escorting a convoy across the North Atlantic. It was winter, the worst time to be at sea. Waves like mountains, wind that cut through layers of clothing, ice forming on the deck. They had been at sea for 8 days, tired, cold, alert but weary. That's when the alarm sounded. Submarine contact. Close. Too close. James ran to his station. They prepared to drop depth charges. Standard procedure. But something was different this time. The submarine wasn't trying to escape. It was maneuvering, positioning itself. Then they heard it. A sound underwater. Mechanical. Moving. Closing in. An acoustic torpedo. Hunting them. James knew what it meant. You couldn't outrun it, couldn't evade it. The faster you went, the louder your engines, the easier to track. The captain made a decision, a terrible decision. He ordered the engines stopped, complete silence. Maybe, just maybe, the torpedo would lose its target. Pass by. Detonate harmlessly. The ship went quiet. No engines, no movement. Just drifting in the freezing Atlantic, helpless. Every man held his breath, waiting, listening. Some prayed, others stared at the water, searching for a sign. Any sign. Minutes passed. Felt like hours. The tension was unbearable. Then, in the distance, an explosion. The torpedo had found something else. A merchant ship. Not a warship. A cargo vessel filled with grain. It sank in minutes. James watched men jump into the water, watched them struggle, watched some of them disappear beneath the waves. His ship survived, but 73 men on that cargo ship didn't. James never forgot that moment. The guilt of survival, the randomness of it, the cruelty of a weapon that couldn't tell soldier from sailor, enemy from innocent. This was the unintended consequence. The thing our engineer never wanted. His weapon was designed to protect convoys, to stop submarines. Acoustic torpedoes were deployed by both sides. Germans, Americans, British. Each refinement made them more accurate, more deadly, but also more indiscriminate. And the sailors on both sides paid the price. Back in the workshops, our engineer heard the stories, the reports. He knew what his creation was doing, and it haunted him. He had wanted to save lives, to protect the vulnerable. But war doesn't work that way. Every weapon, no matter how smart, becomes part of the machine, part of the killing. He considered stopping, walking away, but the war continued, and other engineers would finish what he started. Better, he thought, to be involved, to try to make it more precise, more controlled. So he worked on improvements, better acoustic filters, ways to distinguish ships by size, by engine type, to reduce mistakes, to make the weapon do what it was intended to do. But late at night, alone with his thoughts, he wondered, had he made the world safer, or just more dangerous? Around this time, something unexpected happened. Intelligence reports revealed that the enemy was developing countermeasures, devices that created false sounds, decoys that mimicked ship engines, ways to confuse the acoustic system. It was a relief, and a challenge, because it meant the weapon wasn't unstoppable, it could be fooled, defeated, and that meant going back to the drawing board, finding new solutions, making it smarter, more adaptable. But there was also a strange hope in it, because if both sides developed defenses, maybe the weapon would become obsolete, maybe the killing would slow down. Then came a letter. From a widow. Her husband had been a captain on a merchant ship, sunk by an acoustic torpedo. She wrote to the naval ministry, asked why. Why did good men have to die for cargo? For oil and grain? She didn't know our engineer existed, didn't know his name. But somehow her words found him, passed along by a colleague who thought he should see it. He kept that letter. Read it many times. It became a reminder, a weight, a responsibility he would carry for the rest of his life. War had made him an inventor, but it had also made him a killer, even if he never pulled a trigger, even if he never went to sea. And he wasn't alone. Thousands of engineers, scientists, thinkers contributed to the war effort. They built planes, bombs, weapons of unimaginable power, each believing they were helping, protecting, saving. But every creation had a cost: lives, innocence, peace of mind. As the war dragged on, our engineer's health declined. The stress, the guilt, the endless work. He grew thin, grey, older than his years. But he kept going, because stopping felt like betrayal, like abandoning those sailors still out there, still at risk. And then, in the spring of 1945, something changed. Whispers. Rumours. The war was ending. Germany was collapsing. Japan was cornered. Hope, fragile and uncertain, began to emerge. April 1945. The war in Europe was in its final days. Cities lay in ruins. Armies were retreating. The end was near. Everyone could feel it. But at sea, the fighting continued. Submarines still prowled. Torpedoes still launched. Men still died. This is the story of the last great hunt, the moment when the acoustic torpedo proved both its brilliance and its horror. A German submarine, U-853, was operating off the coast of America. Old, battered, its crew exhausted, but still dangerous, still deadly. The captain was a veteran, a man who had survived 3 years of war. He knew the Allies were winning, knew Germany was falling, but he had orders: keep fighting, disrupt supply lines, make them pay for every mile of ocean. On May 5th, just days before the war ended, U-853 encountered an American merchant ship, the Black Point, a coal transport, slow, unarmed, easy prey. The submarine fired a traditional torpedo, not acoustic, just a standard weapon. It struck the Black Point in the engine room. The explosion killed 12 men instantly. The ship began to sink. Survivors took to lifeboats, called for help. Within hours, American destroyers arrived. 4 of them. Armed, angry, determined to find the submarine. They knew it was still in the area. Submarines of that era had limited range, limited speed underwater. It couldn't have gone far. The destroyers spread out, activated their sonar, listening, searching. U-853 went deep, silent, hoping to hide, hoping they would give up and leave. But they didn't leave, because this time the Americans had something new, acoustic torpedoes of their own, weapons that could hunt in the depths. That didn't need a direct line of sight. The hunt began. Imagine being inside that submarine, a steel tube under crushing pressure, dark except for dim red lights, the air thick, stale, the smell of oil and sweat and fear. You hear the destroyers above, their propellers churning, their sonar pinging, each ping echoing through the hull. Getting closer, the captain orders everyone to stay still. No talking, no movement. Even breathing feels too loud. Hours pass. The destroyers don't leave. They circle. Patient, methodical. Then you hear it. A splash. Something entering the water. Not a depth charge. Something else. Smaller. Faster. An acoustic torpedo. It's searching for you. Listening for your heartbeat. The faint hum of your batteries. The creak of your hull under pressure. You can't turn off everything. The submarine needs power, needs oxygen circulation, needs some systems running. And that's enough. Enough sound for the torpedo to find. The crew hears it approaching. The mechanical whine of its propeller, growing louder, closer. Some men close their eyes. Some hold photographs. Some pray. The captain stands rigid, knowing, accepting. The torpedo strikes the stern. The explosion ruptures the hull. Water floods in. Violent, unstoppable. The submarine begins its descent. Into the dark, into the depths. 55 men inside. No escape. No hope. It settles on the ocean floor, silent now. A tomb. Above, the destroyers confirm the kill. The submarine is destroyed, the threat eliminated. There is relief, satisfaction, vengeance for the men on the Black Point. But there is also something else, a heaviness, because this is the end of something. The last submarine sunk in the Atlantic during the war. The last use of the acoustic torpedo in that terrible conflict. Days later, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe ended. Celebrations erupted in cities around the world. People danced in streets, kissed strangers, wept with joy. But in quiet harbours, in naval workshops, in the hearts of those who built the weapons, there was silence. Because they knew the cost, not just the enemy dead, but everyone. The sailors, the soldiers, the civilians, the children. Millions of lives, changed forever, ended forever. And for what? Territory? Ideology? Pride? Our engineer heard the news of Germany's surrender while sitting in his office. Alone, papers scattered around him, blueprints, calculations, the work of years. He didn't celebrate, didn't smile. He just sat there, staring at nothing, feeling everything. His weapon had worked, had proven effective, had changed naval warfare forever. But at what cost? He thought about James, the Scottish sailor, the widow who wrote that letter, the 73 men on the cargo ship, the 55 men on U-853, all the names, all the faces, all the futures erased. This was victory. But it tasted like ash. After the war, the world tried to forget, to move on, to rebuild. Cities rose from rubble, economies recovered. Life, somehow, continued. But some things couldn't be forgotten. Some wounds couldn't heal. Our engineer left the naval program, returned to civilian life. He took a job at a university, teaching, helping young minds understand physics, mathematics, the beauty of solving problems. But he never spoke about the war, never mentioned the acoustic torpedo, never told his students what he had created. Some colleagues knew, whispered about it, the man who built the ship killer. But they respected his silence, understood it. One day, years after the war, a young student approached him, bright, curious, eager to learn about weapons technology, about innovation in wartime. The engineer looked at him for a long moment, saw himself. He told the student something unexpected. He said, "The greatest innovation is not the weapon you create, it's the weapon you choose not to create." The student didn't understand. Not then, but the engineer knew. He had created something powerful, something that had saved some lives and taken others, something that would outlive him, because the acoustic torpedo didn't disappear after the war. It evolved, became more sophisticated, more precise. Modern navies still use versions of it today, guided by computers, by satellites, by technologies he could never have imagined. His idea, his illegal idea, became permanent, part of the arsenal of war. And that was the burden, the legacy, the price of innovation. But there was another side to the story, a quieter side. James, the Scottish sailor who survived, returned home after the war. He never went to sea again, couldn't bring himself to. The ocean held too many ghosts. Instead, he became a teacher, taught children about fishing, about respecting the water, about the men who died there. He told them stories, not about glory, not about heroism, but about fear, about survival, about the friends he lost. He wanted them to understand that war wasn't an adventure. It was a tragedy. And every weapon, no matter how smart, was part of that tragedy. The widow who wrote that letter remarried, had children, built a new life, but she never stopped visiting her first husband's memorial, never stopped placing flowers there. She forgave, but she never forgot. And around the world, in small towns and big cities, thousands of others did the same. They carried memories, honored the dead, tried to make sense of what they had survived. Our engineer lived into old age. He watched the Cold War unfold, watched nuclear weapons proliferate, watched technology advance beyond anything he could have predicted, and he wondered. Had humanity learned anything? Or were they doomed to repeat the same mistakes? Building bigger weapons, smarter weapons, more terrible weapons. In his final years, he wrote a memoir, not for publication, just for himself, a way to process, to understand, to confess. He wrote about the excitement of creation, the thrill of solving impossible problems, the pride of success. But mostly, he wrote about regret, about the faces he never saw, the names he never knew, the lives his invention had ended. He wrote, "I wanted to protect, but protection requires violence, and violence once started is hard to stop." He died quietly, in his sleep, surrounded by family. His work was mentioned in obituaries, his contributions noted, but the full weight of what he had carried remained private, known only to him. This is the lesson, the truth we must remember. Every war creates inventors, people who believe they are helping, solving problems, making things better, and sometimes they do. Sometimes innovation saves lives, shortens conflicts, prevents greater horrors. But always, there is a cost. Lives taken, innocence lost, futures stolen. The acoustic torpedo was brilliant, revolutionary, effective, but it was also a reminder that human ingenuity, when turned to destruction, is both powerful and terrible. We can create anything. We can solve any problem. We can build weapons that hunt by sound, by heat, by invisible signals. But should we? That's the question each generation must answer. Not just engineers, not just soldiers, all of us. Because the weapons we build today will be used tomorrow, and the consequences will outlive us all. The ocean is vast, deep, full of mysteries, but it's also full of ghosts. Ships that never made it home, sailors who never saw their families again, submarines resting on the ocean floor, their crews still inside. They are silent now, but their stories remain, echoing, reminding us. War is not an abstraction. It's not statistics or strategies. It's people, young people, frightened people, brave people, people who wanted to live. And every weapon, no matter how smart, takes that away. So remember the inventor who tried to save lives and ended up taking them. Remember the sailors who died in dark water. Remember the families who waited for news that never came. Remember that innovation has a price, and sometimes that price is paid in blood. The acoustic torpedo still exists, in modern form, more advanced, more deadly, protecting ships, hunting targets. Our engineer's idea lives on, but so does the question he never answered. The question he carried to his grave. Was it worth it? You decide. Because the next war, the next weapon, the next impossible idea, that's in your hands now. Choose wisely. Remember, and never forget the cost of silence. The sound of waves returns. Gentle, eternal, indifferent to human struggle. A final image appears. Black and white, rows of white crosses in a military cemetery by the sea. The camera slowly pulls back, higher, until the cemetery becomes small, the ocean becomes everything, and the waves continue, forever.